For whoever does the will of my Father in heaven is my brother and sister and mother. Matthew 12, verse 50. By this we know that we love the children of God when we love God and obey his commandments. 1 John 5:2. Crossroads are there for all of us. We may move along rather easily from day to day, enjoying the view, taking in the sunshine, and then it comes. A crossroad, a choice point. Which way do we go? What way lies down each path if we go to the right or the left or straight ahead? What way does our heart tell us to go? What way seems right, logically? And what way is God's way? The answers aren't easy, and the way that our heart and our mind and God tells us don't always align. These crossroads, they can bring daunting spiritual pain. They can bring us to our knees, and they can bring even destruction. Tonight, we have an expert on the crossroad of obedience. He was there in the garden when Jesus faced that crossroad, when he confronted his part in God's plan of salvation. Tonight, we welcome the disciple John, the disciple that Jesus loved. John, welcome.
Thank you.
Can you tell us something about that night in the garden? What you saw and what you learned about Jesus?
Well, I'm almost embarrassed to be here. Yes, I was there in the garden with Jesus, but I certainly didn't understand what was going on. And I certainly was no help to him there.
Did you see him praying?
Yes. He went away to pray, and he asked us to pray with him. I could tell he was struggling, but after the meal, after the cups of wine that we drank with the Passover meal, after the walk to the garden in the dark, I just couldn't keep my eyes open. I admit I fell asleep.
Didn't you understand the terror, the absolute terror that Jesus was facing?
No, not really. Not then. It was not unusual for us to go off as a group and join Jesus in prayer. It happened often. Jesus was busy at prayer many times as we traveled with him. I just didn't know what was going on there in the garden.
Do you understand now?
Well, now, for sure, certainly. I wish I could go back to the garden and do it over. I wish I could join Jesus in his prayer, in his struggle. I know it would be different now. Jesus was facing the most difficult crossroad in his life. He was staring at the reality of the suffering he would have to endure, facing the cross, and most terribly, facing it alone.
Was it really different from the other times that he had to choose between his way and God's way? I mean, was his choice to obey in spite of the pain so unusual?
No, not really. We know that Jesus was often tempted in his life to step away from God's plan for him, God's plan for us. Satan harassed him like he had done in the wilderness with a way out, a way to avoid the suffering. Just bow down and worship me, Satan said, and I will give all this to you. He was offering a shortcut that avoided the cross. But Jesus sent him away and clung to the path that God had set for him.
So what does his choice to obey, despite the terror, mean to you now?
Well, it inspires me, and it convicts me. It must do the same for you.
Well, how do you mean, for me?
Well, I'm certainly not unique. I faced a crossroad like Jesus's many times in my life. Oh, not with the weight of the world on my shoulders, but with my own heart and conflict over which way to go. I faced that crossroad every time I came to the place where I heard the voice in me say, look, you know what will happen if you choose to obey God's claim on your life. You'll be hurt, you'll be excluded, you'll be scorned, you'll be persecuted. Every time I stood at the crossroad, I remembered Jesus in the garden and asked him to stay with me and to stay awake and to watch with me and pray with me.
Did that happen often?
Well, in those years, in the years after Jesus ascended, all of us who followed him were faced with the choice to follow or deny him. If we denied him, we could escape the threats, the persecution, even the death that faced us. We were outcasts, rejected by many of our brothers, and threatened often with suffering or death. I asked God's help to remain faithful and encourage others to do the same. in my book called The Revelation. I wrote, "Do not fear what you are about to suffer. Behold, the devil is about to throw some of you into prison, that you may be tested, and for 10 days you will have tribulation. Be faithful unto death, and I will give you the crown of life."
But we aren't persecuted. No one's throwing us in jail or taking away our property because we're Christians. We don't face that kind of crossroad.
Well, you face the crossroad of obedience every time you confront a choice that asks, will you follow your own way, the way of the world, the way that others push you to, the way that you think will be easiest or most pleasant for you? Or will you follow the way that Jesus would lead for you, the way of obedience?
But that's not monumental. Those choices, they happen every day, every hour.
And that's exactly why you need the power and presence of God's Spirit every day. That's what Jesus was doing there in the garden and on the cross. He was bringing forgiveness and a new life to you there. By God's power and the sacrifice of Jesus, you begin each day new and forgiven, new and able to make the choice of obedience.
And how can we make the right choices?
Well, here's another thing that I wrote in my gospel. Jesus said, "Abide in me and I in you." The same Jesus who struggled there in the garden, the one who went on to the cross, the one who rose there in our hearts, with us at the crossroad and in our choices.
Thank you, John. Thank you for the words of encouragement. We will remember you and we will rejoice with you for what Jesus has done and will do in us and through us. Thanks be to God.